Coral reefs are an underwater ecosystem made up of reef-building corals that make up colonies of several coral polyps. These coral polyps are held together by calcium carbonate. More coral reefs build up from stony corals, and stony corals are known to have polyps that cluster in groups. Here's an image of a coral reef ecosystem and varying fish species that surround it. Coral reefs maintain the biodiversity of aquatic life by creating habitats for a variety of fish species. 25% of the ocean's fish depends on coral reefs for shelter, food, reproduction, and nesting their offspring. Providing shelter also gives protection for these species from different predators and to ensure their survival. Here's an image of a clownfish in a coral reef as its home, being protected from predators, being able to get food from it, reproduce, and be able to give this survival to the next generation of its species. Coral reefs are also very beneficial to humans by speeding up cancer research that focuses on marine organisms, which actually accounts for more than half of cancer research developments. Coral reefs also provide coastal protection by reducing wave energy by a whopping 97% before it hits the shore. So that means that it makes the waves hit a lot softer to prevent certain erosion and destruction. This protects coastlines from erosion as well as storms and floods. This eventually leads to providing jobs for the people living in communities nearby this ecosystem. And coral reefs also provide medicine to humans that have been developed from beneficial traits of the species living in the coral reef ecosystems. Besides this, coral reefs also benefit humans by providing food of about 5 to 10 tons of fish per kilometer squared yearly, and also by benefiting humans economically through tourism. Even though tourism doesn't directly benefit these coral reefs because they may be stressed out or harmed if tourism is not regulated properly, it also brings an income to humans who rely on these recreational services that these ecosystems provide. As can be seen in this image, which it looks very pretty, many people want to go out and see it.
Coral reefs have been proven by many scientists to have the highest biodiversity of any ecosystem on the entire planet. Although coral reefs only take up less than 1% of the entire ocean floor, coral reefs provide a home for more than 25% of all marine life. There are approximately 6,000 species of coral reefs that could be found in different parts of the world's ocean. Some of these corals grow in shallow and warm waters near coastlines. Others have adapted to thrive in the deep, cold, and dark sea floor where there is very little sunlight. A well-known species of coral is deep-water coral. Two examples of this species is cold-water coral and ivory bush coral. This species of coral lives in the deep waters of the ocean where it is very, very cold and dark. Another species of coral is soft coral. Two examples is the pulsating benia and rough leather coral. These corals lack a hard skeleton and usually do not take part in reef building and structuring. Instead, these reefs provide shelter for many species of fish. A third species of coral is bubble coral. Bubble coral are found in the Red Sea, meaning they are a supercoral that have adapted to the extreme conditions of this body of water. Although there are over 6,000 species of coral reefs, a majority of them are very vulnerable to climate change and therefore have been added to the list of endangered marine organisms. An example of these endangered species is pillar coral. Pillar corals form a building-like structure that forms a habitat as well as a safe refuge for fish. The structure that pillar corals form also helps with storm surges, protecting other species of coral within the community. Another example is blue corals. Blue corals are detrimental in coral reef communities because these corals serve as a natural sunscreen for coral reefs. Blue corals contain a protein that filters out harmful UV radiation, which is detrimental to coral reproduction. A third example would be elkhorn corals. These corals serve as a protection from strong waves to the coral reef community, and also form a complex habitat for many fish and marine organisms.
What is coral bleaching? This is when corals are stressed by changes in conditions such as temperature, light, or nutrients. They expel the symbiotic algae living in their tissues, causing them to turn completely white. Warm water temperatures can result in coral bleaching. When water is too warm, corals will expel the algae living in their tissues, causing the coral to turn completely white. When a coral bleaches, it is not dead. Corals can survive a bleaching event, but they're under more stress. They're more vulnerable and are subject to die. But not all bleaching events are due to warm water. It can also happen if water temperatures are too cold. For example, in 2010, in the Florida Keys, cold water temperatures caused coral bleaching event that resulted in some coral death. Other causes of coral bleaching. We already talked about change in ocean temperature, which is the leading cause of coral bleaching, but other causes can be runoff and pollution. Runoff can carry pollutants which can bleach near-shore corals. Overexposure to sunlight. High solar radiation contributes to bleaching in shallow water corals. Extreme low tides. Exposure to the air during extreme low tides can cause bleaching in shallow corals. This is an example of a healthy coral. Corals and algae that live in their tissue depend on each other to survive. They have a symbiotic relationship with each other because these algae are the coral's primary food source and give them their color. This is an example of a stressed coral. When the symbiotic relationship becomes stressed due to the increase in ocean temperature or pollution, then the algae leave the coral's tissue. And this would be an example of a bleached coral. Without the algae, the coral loses its major source of food, turns white, and becomes more vulnerable. So what is being done to save and protect corals? EPA protects coral reefs by implementing Clean Water Act programs that protect water quality in watersheds and coastal zones of coral reefs areas. It also supports efforts to monitor and assesses the conditions of U.S. coral reefs. It also is developing new tools to adapt coral reefs to better handle changing conditions.
Scientists have been studying supercorals to better understand how corals respond to climate change and develop conservation practices for a warming ocean. Supercorals can be defined as those that have demonstrated the ability to tolerate or recover from stress and thrive under a stressor, such as a warming ocean. In contrast to this picture, this shows a normal or like unhealthy coral reef that has been affected by bleaching. The picture was taken in 2010 in Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. Um, New educational projects are being made and to alert people on the states of corals and these super corals. So one example could be the one in the aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. The picture of the aquarium is the one in the left. They have an exhibition called the Five Infinity Coral Exhibition. This one here in the right, and here the exhibit creates the illusion of coral reef habitats using mirrors. They show different coral reef environments, including a healthy, thriving reef, an unhealthy bleach reef, and a reef where only a few supercorals have survived a bleaching event. Scientists understand how higher temperatures cause corals to die off. Corals have a symbiotic relationship with an algae called zooxanthellae that lives inside their cells and give them the energy through photosynthesis. When algae gets too hot, they release chemicals toxins to the coral. Therefore, the coral expels the algae and turns white or bleaches. Now, researchers are still trying to understand why some corals are more resistant to stressors than others. However, there might be an explanation. Corals can host different types of zooxanthellae, and some of these might be superalgae that do better in higher temperatures and higher acidity levels. So if this is the case, scientists can help make this mutualistic relationship better. An alternative could be to give corals the best scintillate they can have. This is a great strategy because corals take hundreds to thousands of years to adapt to warming temperatures. However, by breeding corals through this process known as human assisted evolution and creating supercorals, there is an opportunity to restore coral reefs in a decade or two.